Coming into next season, I believe these are the 6 most underrated teams right now. And I'm starting off with the Golden State Warriors. Once Jimmy Butler came over after the trade, everything changed for the Dubs. Once you put Jimmy Butler alongside of Steph Curry and Draymond Green, suddenly the Warriors looked flat out dangerous again. To end off last season, they went 23-7 with him in the lineup compared to 25-27 without him. Without Butler, they were painfully average. A plus 0.7 net rating, an offensive rating of 113.9, and a defensive rating of 113.2. Numbers that are really quite mediocre. But the second Butler came over, their numbers flipped into elite territory basically overnight. Their net rating jumped up to an amazing plus 9.6 amongst the best teams in the league. The offense climbed to 117.8, and the defense tightened to 108.2, all of which are contender level numbers. Butler gave them exactly what they had been missing for years: a secondary shot creator, a switchable defender, a smart playmaker, and maybe the most underrated aspect of his game was his ability to get to the free throw stripe. With Butler available, the Warriors shot nearly 26 free throw attempts per 100 possessions, good for the 99th percentile, and that was night and day compared to the 16.7 they were attempting before he got there. And it wasn't just his offensive impact either. Defensively, Butler completely changed their identity. And then you've still got Stephen Curry, who is easily still a top 10 player in the game. And somehow, he was better with Jimmy beside him. Curry's true shooting percentage jumped up by 6%, which is a major leap. And he was able to average 4 more points and 1 more assist in the games that he played with Butler. The chemistry between those two was basically immediate. It was almost like Butler unlocked a new version of Steph that we didn't even know we were missing. Now, even though the rest of the team is basically the same as last season, apart from Kevon Looney heading to New Orleans and Al Horford and Seth Curry coming in, this is still a really good team. Their depth chart is now deep, flexible, and full of experienced guys who can actually impact games, while fitting perfectly around what Steph and the Warriors are trying to achieve on the offensive side of the floor. When you take a step back and have a look at it, the Warriors supporting cast just looks so much more balanced this season than it was at the beginning of last. For a veteran team, this kind of extra bench depth really matters. They do have guys who can step in, produce on any given night, and keep Curry, Butler, and Draymond's minutes as low as possible throughout the regular season. And really, that's going to be the key to trying to keep this team as fresh as possible for when they really want to be at their best in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, all of this circles back to Jimmy Butler. He is their swing factor player. If Jimmy plays at the same level that he did last season, then I believe the Warriors could absolutely win another playoff series. But if he finds an extra gear, if he elevates beyond that and pushes an All-NBA selection, then they really could win multiple rounds and even make a push for the NBA Finals. Now, the next team that I think is really underrated coming into this season is the Miami Heat. I've heard almost no noise about them all off season. And yet, in an Eastern Conference that isn't exactly loaded with talent, I think Miami could really surprise a lot of people. They've quietly built something that, if it clicks, could absolutely make some noise in the postseason. Let's start off with Kel'el Ware. In just his second preseason outing against San Antonio, he appeared to be a real weapon. 29 points, 12 rebounds, a steal, and a block on 63% shooting, going toe-to-toe with Victor Wembanyama. He caught lobs and even hit 3 out of 6 from deep. The dude looked like a legitimate modern big. Last season, he shared the floor quite a bit with Bam Adebayo, and it's clear that Miami's looking to lean into that again, because those configurations showed some real promise. A plus 4.2 net rating and a defensive rating of 110.4, which was in the 85th percentile league-wide. But the offensive side of the floor wasn't perfect. It was certainly clunky at times, which is kind of par for the course course, in Miami. But even the 114.6 offensive rating that they had might have been considered a win inside of the Heat's front office, just given how defensively focused the Heat usually are. I actually think it's going to be that double big lineup that Miami goes with as their starting five to begin this season. You've got Norman Powell, Tyler Hero, and then either Jaime Jaquez or Nikola Jovic, depending on which guy earns the spot in the preseason. But the big wrinkle here is that Hero is going to miss some time to start the year, after dealing with a left foot injury that needed surgery over the offseason. The team hasn't exactly given a timeline, but it's clear that he's going to miss at least the early stretch, and that is a big loss. Hero was good enough last season to earn himself an all-star nod, and he had easily the best season of his career, carrying a lot of their offensive load. Thankfully, the Heat were able to make a really smart move in the offseason, trading with the Clippers to bring in Norman Powell. He's expected to slot right in as the team's starting shooting guard and primary ball handler before Hero returns. After a quiet first preseason game against Orlando, Powell found his rhythm, dropping 18 points in just 16 minutes against the Bucks, and then another 18 on San Antonio. You can see him getting comfortable in the new system. He's picking his spots, and most importantly, he's not trying to force up shots just to replace Hero's production. He's also leaning on Miami's veteran core while still being vocal about how he believes the team can get better. And that's an early sign that he's going to be a great locker room fit. And the best part about all of this for Miami is how we already know that Norman Powell can thrive in this role. He did it just last season with the Clippers when Kawhi was sidelined early, putting up 21.8 points per game on nearly 48% shooting from the floor and over 41% from deep. That's exactly the kind of instant offense and spacing Miami are going to need in the early going without Tyler Hero. If this group can get healthy and build chemistry, Miami's core makes a lot more sense than people realize. They've got two legitimate weapons in the backcourt with Hero and Powell, and then they've also got two in the front court with Bam and Ware. In an Eastern Conference that's not overloaded with powerhouse type teams, that might actually be enough to push for a playoff spot, especially with their defensive identity. Their whole formula is going to be about getting stops, grinding out games, and just finding enough scoring to win. And honestly, that's worked for them before. Even if Miami once again ends up in the play-in tournament, I still wouldn't count them out from making a playoff run with the roster they've got. They have the experience, the defense, and now maybe even a little more offensive firepower than people really are recognizing. The next team that I think is really underrated coming into this season is the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's funny because if you actually follow the NBA closely, you know that this team is legit. They've now made back-to-back runs to the Western Conference Finals and have one of the best young cores in the NBA. But for some reason, the betting markets don't seem to agree. They've got Minnesota ranked 9th in championship odds, with the Orlando Magic sitting ahead of them at 8th, which is just wild to me. Don't get me wrong, Orlando's fun, young, and they are improving quickly, but they're still nowhere near Minnesota's level just yet. This is a team that's been consistently deep into the postseason, has continuity, and has shown that they can hang with anyone. And it's not just Orlando that probably shouldn't be ahead of them. The Wolves were also behind the Lakers, an aging team with major depth questions. And they're even behind the Clippers, which is also insane given how much controversy surrounds that franchise. So when you put all of that together, it's pretty clear why I think Minnesota's being slept on. But the real question is, why do they deserve to be ranked higher? Let's start with Anthony Edwards. The guy's already a two-time All-NBA second-team selection, and he just continues to get better every single year. Last season, he led the entire NBA in three-point attempts and makes, while knocking them down at a near 40% clip. He's entering that territory where every year he adds something new to his game. And the next steps for him to take are pretty clear. Becoming more consistent defensively, drawing more contact to bump his free throw rate, closing games at an elite level, and evolving as a playmaker. If he's able to check those boxes, he's not going to be just an All-NBA guy anymore. He would be in the real, legitimate MVP conversation. What makes Minnesota even more exciting is that their young core is still ridiculous young. Edwards is 24, Jaden McDaniels is 25, and Naz Reid is 26. All of them are either entering or just hitting their primes, and they've already had real playoff experience, which is rare for players of that age. Under Chris Finch, the Wolves have been able to develop talent quicker and better than anybody could have predicted. And that bodes well, because there's a lot of young guys this season who are going to be given opportunities to really succeed. Terrence Shannon Jr., Rob Dillingham, and Jalen Clark. Shannon's already showing signs of being rotation ready. Dillingham looks like a microwave scorer with that Jamal Crawford type spark. And Clark brings elite defensive tools with real upside if his jumper continues to get better. Replacing Nickeil Alexander-Walker with these three guys might lower their floor in terms of experience, but it definitely could raise their long-term ceiling. Tactically, Minnesota has always leaned into crashing the offensive glass, a trend we've seen work really well league-wide. Last season, Minnesota finished top 10 in defensive rebounding and above average in offensive rebounds, giving them more second chance opportunities to get easy buckets. With a full off season and training camp dedicated to tightening that approach, their efficiency and late game execution, you'd hope, would only be getting better. And the crazy part, they already won 49 games last season, but had an expected win total of 53 games based on their point differential. Teams that underperform their expected wins like this usually bounce back strong the following season, especially when their core is improving. So, just by cleaning up a few late game possessions, Minnesota could easily have 4 to 5 more wins this season, which would have put them in that 55 win plus group last season. So when we look at everything, a young core, a potential MVP candidate in Anthony Edwards, underrated depth, and real playoff experience, it's wild to me that Minnesota aren't being talked about more. If things break right, this team could go from a quiet contender to a real championship threat really quickly. Now, the next team that I think is being underrated coming into this season are the Dallas Mavericks. ESPN has them projected to win just 44 games, which would see them as the 9th seed in the West, 1 spot below Minnesota and 1 spot above Sacramento. And while I think Minnesota is criminally underrated, I genuinely believe Dallas could finish much higher than that. This might actually be one of the deepest teams in the entire league. And when you envision the best defenses coming into this season, there's a clear top 3 in my mind: Oklahoma City, Houston, and Dallas. They all look like they're going to be elite defenses, but for different reasons. And Dallas's reason is their dangerous size. This team is enormous, and that physicality is going to matter. You could see it immediately in their first preseason game. Yes, it was against the Thunder's second unit, but Dallas looked like they were grown men playing against boys. They were bigger, stronger, more disciplined, and still pretty mobile across the board. That combination of size and agility is what's going to make them a defensive nightmare this season. Early on though, Dallas are going to rely heavily on that defense to win games, especially since Kyrie Irving isn't expected to return until later on in the year. That's going to put a lot of responsibility on Cooper Flagg's shoulders very early. Without Kyrie, the Mavericks are going to lean hard onto Klay Thompson, D'Angelo Russell, and Flagg to generate offense, which, let's be honest, isn't exactly the most stable or predictable trio in the league. But that's where Flagg becomes the real X factor. So much of this team's success in the early going depends on how NBA ready Cooper Flagg is. There are 3 major areas of Flagg's game that could really swing the Mavericks season: his ability to be a point guard, his 3-point shooting, and the defense. Starting off with the first one, with Kyrie out, Flagg is going to see legitimate minutes at the point guard. If he can hold his own running that offense, that would be massive. Even once Kyrie returns, just having Flagg comfortable initiating sets, pushing the tempo after rebounds, and acting as a secondary playmaker would give Dallas another dynamic look. He's going to be asked to read defenses, find shooters like Klay, hit cutters on the roll, and make the right reads out in transition. Then once he's off the ball on offense, his responsibilities don't stop there, because he's going to need to space the floor at a good level, confidently taking the catch and shoot and spot up threes with no hesitation. Because in the games with Anthony Davis last season, Dallas were the worst 3-point shooting team in the NBA. So it's crucial that Flagg Flag can at least be a positive there. Then defensively, I believe this is where he could really shine straight away. Coop just has that natural timing and awareness as a help defender, coming over from the weak side to block shots or disrupt plays at the rim. And when you pair that interior presence of Anthony Davis, Daniel Gafford, and Derek Lively, that's just a nasty front court. Those three are going to make life miserable for anybody trying to attack the paint, and then Cooper Flag will be able to just rotate over and make smart defensive reads. Dallas is essentially building a Boston Celtics type style when it comes to defense. Everybody's long, switchable, and physical. Nearly everybody who's going to be getting minutes, at least at the beginning of the year, are going to be taller than 6'5". And there's just nowhere for opposing offenses to hide. Not really any guy that you can just pick on. That's going to be their survival blueprint early in the year, because without Kyrie, the offense could really be quite ugly for Dallas. But where this team becomes truly underrated is what happens when Kyrie Irving returns. Think about what we saw from the Clippers last season after Kawhi returned. They had locked in on their defense before he came back, and then once Leonard came into the lineup, they took off offensively as well, as they were one of the best teams to close the regular season. Dallas has that same path that they need to follow. If they can establish themselves as a top 3 defensive unit before Kyrie returns, which they absolutely have the personnel to do so, then this team could instantly be a problem when Kyrie returns, as long as he's at least 85% of the guy he was last season. Of course, there are some massive what-ifs here. Kyrie has to get back to that level. Anthony Davis has to stay healthy. Cooper Flag has to be ready for NBA minutes. And the Mavericks are going to need good years out of Klay Thompson and D'Angelo Russell. But if those things break their way, I believe Dallas has a real shot to contend in the Western Conference. The team is just far better than people realize or are giving them credit for. And by later in the season, when Kyrie's back, I think everybody's going to realize just how much of a threat the Dallas Mavericks really are. Now, the next team that I believe is being underrated coming into this season is the Milwaukee Bucks. These are not the same Bucks that we've been used to. They've got a new identity, a new system, and a completely different game plan that could make them way more dangerous than people are thinking. Essentially, they're trying to become what I call the Milwaukee Pacers, taking what Indiana did last year, which got them all the way to the finals, and adapting it around their own superstar, Giannis Antetokounmpo. They even went out there and grabbed the Pacers center, Miles Turner, to help out and make that system work even better. Now, Turner actually spoke out about this during camp. He said not every team can just copy Indiana's style and expect success, but he genuinely believes Milwaukee could pull it off because of the elite shooting around Giannis. And he's right. Last season, the Bucks quietly ranked first in the entire NBA for three-point shooting percentage. And when you look at their shooters with AJ Green, Gary Trent Jr., Bobby Portis, and even Brook Lopez back then, it really wasn't a surprise. Lopez might be gone now, but Turner is just a replacement at this stage of their careers. But here's the wild part. Despite being first in percentage, Milwaukee ranked just 18th in attempts. That was a massive missed opportunity, and it's exactly what this new system is designed to fix. The Bucks want to push the pace, attack in transition, and create open looks through speed, spacing, corner threes, trail threes, and drive-in kicks. It's all about rhythm and flow. They're basically trying to generate volume and efficiency using their athleticism and shooting to try and overwhelm teams offensively. And the reason I think it actually could work is pretty simple. They're putting the ball in Giannis's hands full time. He's not just the focal point of the offense. He is going to be the offense. The entire system is built around maximizing what he does best, getting downhill and forcing defenses into impossible decisions. If you don't send help, he's finishing at the rim. And if you do, he's kicking it out to an open shooter or a cutter going backdoor. It's a perfect blend of chaos and control, and Giannis is just so good in those situations. And then there's the depth, something people are really sleeping on. This roster goes about 10 or 11 deep with legit NBA contributors. Now, not all of these guys are going to play every night, but that's exactly the point. Internal competition is going to be fierce. Practices are going to be intense, and that iron sharpens iron mentality is only going to make this this team even better. Just look at their first preseason game against Miami. They forced 15 turnovers, all of them coming off of steals. That isn't something you'd usually see from a veteran team this early, as it shows you just how different this team is now. They're up in your face, pressuring you full court, pounding opposing guards, and then sprinting the other way, trying to generate easy looks. It's aggressive, it's chaotic, and it's exactly the kind of identity shift that could make the Milwaukee Bucks really difficult to deal with this season. Now, the final team that I believe is being underrated coming into this season are the Detroit Pistons. What's funny about Detroit is that a lot of people still think of them as the team from last season, the group that was one of the worst professional sports teams ever assembled. But they completely flipped the script this season. After a slower start to the year, from January onwards, they went 30-20, comfortably over 500, and finished with 46 wins overall. That turnaround didn't just happen by accident. It happened because Cade Cunningham happened. Cunningham was incredible last season, finishing 7th in MVP voting while averaging 26.1 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 9.1 assists per game on 52.1% effective field goal shooting. He finally had the spacing around him to unlock more parts of his game, and it showed. Defenses couldn't load up on him the same way they used to, which opened up driving lanes, passing angles, and just made life easier for everybody on the floor. They weren't exactly an easy out in the playoffs either. They managed to push the Knicks to 6 games in the first round without one of their best interior defenders, Isaiah Stewart, who missed the entire series through injury. And if you watch Stewart over the years, you'd know just how good he is when it comes to defending opposing bigs. Someone that could have been crucial against Karl Anthony Towns in that series. On top of even that, they're getting back Jaden Ivey, who missed half of last season due to a brutal leg injury. Before the injury though, he was having a really good season, averaging about 17 points per game on over 40% shooting from 3. Exactly the kind of dynamic scorer and athlete the team needs next to Cade. Now that he's back, fully healthy, and cleared with no restrictions, that alone gives Detroit a completely different ceiling. What really stood out in their first preseason game against Memphis was what they did on the defensive side of the ball. They forced 9 turnovers in the second quarter alone and scored 50 points off of them over the whole game. It was intense, athletic, and relentless, and very similar to what the Thunder were doing last season. Detroit have the kind of length and energy to be able to do this to teams, smothering them, forcing mistakes, and then running. And when you've got transition athletes like Ron Holland and Asur Thompson, turning defense into offense becomes a real weapon. The national media is way lower than they should be on the Pistons, mostly because of how bad Detroit were last season. But what a lot of people haven't fully caught on to is just how insane that turnaround was. They became the only team in NBA history to triple their win total from one season to the next, and this year they've got 4 big reasons that they should continue to climb. A legitimate superstar in Cade Cunningham, elite defenders, a clear system and identity, and a deeper, better-based roster around Cunningham. This is a group with real momentum, real talent, and the chance to shake up the Eastern Conference. But if you want to see the 8 wildcard players who could make the biggest difference for their teams coming into this season, then you can check out that full breakdown video right now.